Jon Snow stood on the battlements of Castle Black, his breath coming in thin, ragged plumes through the chill air. Though all nights at the wall were cold, this one felt more severe, as if some unknown force beckoned deeper winter forth. Wind ruffled the black fur of his cloak and tugged at the hair that fell around his face. The ramparts beneath his gloved hands were coated in a thin sheen of ice, but he barely noticed. His mind drifted southward, over the forests, the mountains, and the rivers that wove across the 7 kingdoms like veins in a great stony body. Somewhere out there, he felt a presence stir in his blood, a tether that he had never acknowledged, a hunger that lay dormant within him. Ghost lingered at his side, silent as his namesake. The direwolf's ears perked up, as though he too sensed something calling from beyond the black horizon. Jon's eyes flickered to his loyal companion. He felt an echo of Ghost's senses, the warmth of blood pumping, the tension in powerful muscles, the smell of darkness beyond the wall. It was a connection he understood vaguely. But on this cold night, something more pulled at him, something beyond the wolf's sharp instincts. It felt large, ancient, and filled with a simmering heat. He shivered, uncertain whether it was the icy wind or his own apprehension that caused him to tremble. He turned to descend the winding stairs, gloved hand tracing the frosted stone. Each step drummed an echo into the quiet gloom. Once inside, the torches along the corridor battered the shadows into shape. It was late, and most of the brothers were abed. Even so, Castle Black had never felt so alive. Or perhaps it was he who felt more alive. His pulse pounded with the desire to stride out into the night, to climb higher, to see farther. To watch from above, not below. He found himself in his small chamber, lighting the lantern with practiced ease. Its low flame danced across the rough wooden walls. Not for the first time, he realized that much of what once provided him solace, a bed, a trunk of personal effects, a sense of belonging with the brothers, felt too small. Something stirred inside him. He thought of Bran, how his half-brother had an affinity for wolves and ravens. How the boy's eyes sometimes looked beyond their mortal realm. Jon had never admitted envy, but he felt it now. Bran soared in his mind's eye while Jon was stuck on the ground, a man defined by rules and vows and the burdens of duty. Yet, the sense that something had shifted within him grew stronger with every breath. His dreams in recent weeks had become vivid, wreathed in fire instead of winter frost. He undressed, removing cloak and leathers, down to the simple tunic that shielded him from the cold. He caught sight of himself in a fragment of mirror that Sam had salvaged long ago. His reflection was pale in the flickering lantern light, dark hair falling just above his shoulders. The black eyes stared back at him, but there was something else. A glimmer, a flicker of gold that vanished when he blinked. It was so fast that Jon thought it a trick of the flame. But the tightness in his chest suggested otherwise. He doused the light and slid into bed, pulling a worn wool blanket over his limbs. Ghost settled by the door, muzzle on his paws, red eyes shining in the gloom. Jon closed his eyes and willed himself to sleep, but it would be a restless night, filled with dreams of wings, scales, and an otherworldly roar that vibrated through his bones. The dream was a delirium of black wings beating, a swirl of snow and ash. He saw a figure kneeling before a flickering hearth, though the fire flared so hot it smelled of scorching metal. From across a chasm of mist, a dragon's silhouette moved, enormous, reptilian, terrible. He felt the echo of its growl resonate in his blood. Then, like a thunderclap, his mind soared through the creature's eyes. He saw the ground far below, flickering like dying embers. The icy winds parted over scales as dark as a moonless night sky. A sensation of power thundered through him, and in that moment, he existed outside himself. Then it was gone, as swiftly as it came. He jolted awake in bed, breath coming in ragged gasps. His heart hammered so violently it threatened to burst from his chest. Sweat streamed from him despite the frigid air. The lantern was out, leaving only slivers of moonlight tracing across the flagstones. Ghost lifted his head, ears pricking. Jon pressed a hand to his face, trying to keep from trembling. The dream was too vivid. He could still feel the dragon's heartbeat meshing with his own, and the scorching heat in his veins refused to fade. When he finally slept again, the dawn light was already creeping in through the cracks in the shutters. He rose for his duties as a man of the Night's Watch, but a sense of unease haunted him, clinging to every motion. Over the following days, the dream recurred, growing sharper, more detailed. He felt the swirl of snow around the black wings, heard the dragons roar within his soul, smelled smoke and sulfur as if carried on the cold wind. He tried to ignore it, to chalk it up to troubled sleep. But something in him kept reaching for that presence. Night after night, Jon would stand on top of the wall, gazing out. Southward stretched the north, the land of his father's blood. And somewhere beyond that, in the southern skies, were rumors of dragons. Word had arrived of Daenerys Targaryen, the so-called Queen of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, mother of dragons. She had hatched 3 dragons across the sea. Jon had little faith in rumor. He had seen so many in his life that turned out to be fantasies. But something in him had begun to stir whenever he heard mention of dragons. And in his dreams he had begun to see not 1, but 3 silhouettes winging across a smoky sky, sometimes swirling with flecks of white, sometimes with cinders of red. It was a morning like any other, gray and bleak, when a raven arrived from beyond the wall. Sam read the message, eyebrows scrunching. It was garbled, half-coded by the wildlings who had learned bits of the watch cipher. Yet one word stood out: fire. The writer claimed to have seen a winged shadow devouring a herd of goats far beyond the frost fangs. Another sentence mentioned men found burned in the wilderness, as if scorched by dragonfire. The notion seemed impossible, yet it stirred that primal chord inside Jon. He spent the rest of that day in silent turmoil, performing his duties, hearing 100 arguments among the men, and trying to focus on the matters at hand: the movement of free folk, the supply lines to outposts along the wall, the tension among the brothers after the death of some rangers who had gone missing during a patrol. But that night the dream came back, stronger than ever. He was on a rocky outcrop, buffeted by howling winds. The sky churned with low clouds. Before him stood a black beast, massive wings folded against its sleek, scaled body. The stench of sulfur hung in the air. The creature's eyes glowed like banked coals, fixed on him with an uncanny intelligence. Its voice rumbled in his head, though no words were spoken, only a single emotion: longing. And Jon's soul responded, surging forward as though called home. He woke shuddering, the sense of another life pressing upon him. The first hints of dawn filtered through the narrow window. Ghost was standing at the door, hackles raised. The direwolf's ears twitched, and he looked back at Jon, an unspoken question in his red eyes. Jon rose, heart pounding, and made a decision. He would speak to Sam, or perhaps to Maester Aemon, though the old man was gone from them now, having traveled south with Gilly. He thought of Melisandre, the red priestess who had come and gone, proclaiming him Azor Ahai reborn, but that was in the past. He could not speak to her now. That left few others with any knowledge of magic. There was only one living soul at the wall who might have an inkling of what this meant: the boy, or rather the man, who once warged into an eagle. Varamir's Sixskins had died, but his knowledge was carried by some wildlings. Or perhaps there was Tormund Giantsbane, who had seen strange things. But Tormund was no expert in warging, and so Jon felt alone. Still, he could not ignore the message in his blood. He would depart the wall. That was no small decision, for he was Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, yet he felt the call. He was torn. Did he not vow to remain at the wall until death? But the vow rattled in his mind alongside this fierce demand from within. He could not protect the realm if something stirred that threatened them all. Dragons, or a dragon, or some presence akin to one, lay beyond the wild lands. If he truly had that Targaryen blood rumored in whispers, Rhaegar Targaryen's hidden son, then perhaps that blood now thrummed with a forgotten gift: the power to sense the presence of dragons. But he had no proof, not truly. Ned Stark was the only father he knew. And yet, the dream persisted. Jon wrestled with the question for 2 days. In the end, he summoned Tormund Giantsbane to his chamber, confiding in him carefully that he had reason to travel beyond the wall. Tormund, to Jon's relief, did not laugh. He only scratched his beard, eyes narrowing. "I've heard of men riding beasts in their minds. I've heard of wargs who slip into bears and eagles, If you say a dragon's out there, I can't say you're wrong. They gathered a small, trusted party. Some veterans of the watch, a few wildlings who had sworn to follow Jon. They prepared supplies and gear. Jon left instructions that Sir Dinis Mallister at the Shadow Tower would handle certain matters in his absence. It would be a short foray north, or so he told them all. He would confirm or deny these rumors of a dragon. If there was something out there, some new threat, it was his duty to know. It was the best justification he had for following the call of his dream. On the day they left, the sky was iron gray, spitting flecks of snow. The massive gates of Castle Black groaned as they opened. Ghosts padded at Jon's side. The wind howled off the wall's great height, snatching their breath away. In single file they rode through the gap, out into the immensity of the wilderness beyond. The untamed forest rustled like an ocean of dark pines, and the mountains stood as silent watchers. The journey was arduous. They skirmished with small pockets of restless free folk who had parted ways with Tormund. The temperature plummeted at night, forcing them to shelter under makeshift lean-tos. But always, Jon felt that presence drawing him onward, urging him to press on. Each night the dream returned, but now it flickered with more detail. He saw a massive cave entrance, the ground scorched black at the threshold. Steaming fissures in the earth, the roar of a dragon echoing off stone walls. And that insistent voice, swirling in his mind, drawing him closer. When he woke he would be breathless, certain that he was on the right path. And as they ventured deeper, away from the safety of the wall, his connection to Ghost grew oddly stronger. Sometimes he slipped, as Bran once described, into Ghost's skin. He would see the night through a wolf's keen senses, but that was not all. Faint edges of an even vaster consciousness loomed in the distance of his mind, like a new star on the horizon. Tormund watched him warily. He said little, but Jon sensed the wildling's concern. He too had known skin changers. Men who lost themselves in the beasts they rode. Jon resolved to guard his humanity, though he never felt threatened by the warg-like sensations. In fact, they felt strangely exhilarating, as if he had sloughed off a shell he'd worn too long. The dream demanded answers. The blood demanded answers. Finally, they reached a remote swath of land near the Frostfangs, battered by howling winds and swirling snow. Steam rose from fissures in the ground, and the rocky slopes were bare in patches, as though recently scorched. On that first night in the area, their camp was set in a narrow ravine for shelter. The watchers on guard reported glimpses of something immense passing overhead, blocking out the moonlight for a few heartbeats. Then they heard a roar so profound it shook the ground beneath them. It was real. Jon lay awake, heart thundering, as he realized how close it was. It might have been a foolish mission. The thought of facing a dragon with only a handful of men was madness. But that primal link in Jon's veins roared in agreement with the beast's cry. He could not turn away. They found the cave entrance at dawn. The land around it was scorched, blackened. The air stank of sulfur. Bones littered the ground, mostly animal, some human. Whatever lived here was fearsome and ravenous. Tormund and the others wanted to withdraw to a safe distance, but Jon insisted they approach. Ghost padded forward, hackles raised, whining low in his throat. Jon felt the direwolf's trepidation, but also a strange surge of protectiveness. He carefully led the group toward the yawning mouth of the cave, weapons drawn. The darkness inside was thick, but warm, as if a furnace raged in the mountain's heart. Then, from within, came a resonant growl. Light from the entrance fell upon scales blacker than black, shaped like massive onyx plates. A snout emerged into view, jaws parted to reveal sword-length fangs. The dragon's eyes burned with molten fury, reflecting the flicker of daylight at its back. Its roar erupted like thunder, causing Jon's companions to scramble away in terror. Some dropped weapons, others turned to flee. Tormund stood his ground but cursed under his breath. Ghost snarled, quivering. Jon, however, found himself transfixed. The dream's call had reached its crescendo. He expected fear to coil through his gut like a snake, but instead, a fierce heat washed over him. He could feel the dragon in his mind, a presence that dwarfed his own consciousness, raw with primal power and rage. There was an instant of white-hot tension, then a sudden hush in his ears. He felt Ghost's consciousness flicker like a candle overshadowed by the sunrise. A new bond twisted through him, an ancient, hungry intelligence. The dragon's mind was a tempest of anger, hunger, and deep instinctual cunning. Jon stared into the beast's eyes. He did not run. He did not even raise his sword, for some distant part of him knew steel would do nothing. Instead, as the dragon's jaws opened to unleash a fiery torrent, Jon reached out with his mind. The same way he touched Ghost's spirit, he projected his awareness forward, searching for that point of contact. The dragon unleashed flame, but the torrent veered left, scorching the rock wall rather than Jon. He felt heat sear his cheek, saw cinders swirl around him. The men behind him cried out in terror, scrambling for cover. The roar intensified, shuddering the ground. But through the cacophony, Jon felt the connection solidify. It was like stepping off a precipice into endless air. He soared into the mind of the dragon. For a moment he experienced the world as that beast did. Heat visions, the smell of living flesh, the scrape of talons on stone, the roiling tumult of boundless ferocity. He did not lose himself. Instead, he guided the dragon's awareness, just a fraction, halting its frenzy. The flames subsided. The beast's growl turned into a low rumble, smoke trailing from its nostrils. Its gaze locked on Jon unblinking. Jon stood tall, lowering his sword. He let out the breath he did not realize he was holding. A hush fell upon the ravine as the dragon slowly withdrew into the shadows, as though beckoning Jon to follow. Tormund stood some yards back, eyes wide as moons, mouth working soundlessly. The men stared at Jon as if he had become a creature from legend. Ghost whined, uncertain. "Stay here," Jon said, voice hoarse. "I'll go in alone." "Are you mad?" Tormund hissed. "It'll roast you in a heartbeat. I've never seen a man. By the gods, Jon Snow, what are you? That thing nearly turned us all to ashes." Jon swallowed, hardly able to speak. "Trust me." Tormund made no move to follow. None of them did. Perhaps they thought him doomed. Jon stepped into the darkness, heart pounding, feeling every hair on his body stand on end. Each breath was thick with sulfur. Deeper into the cavern he walked, relying on the faint red glow at the back of the dragon's throat. The creature receded into the blackness but did not attack. The ground underfoot was hot, as if a hidden furnace smoldered beneath. Jon picked his way around scattered bones, noticing the burnt remnants of a wildling's cloak here, a shattered sword there. His mind strained to maintain that tenuous link to the dragon, sensing its wariness, its curiosity, and its savage power. At last, he stood before the beast. Its wings were partially folded, scraping the cavern ceiling. The gloom flickered as it exhaled, flame dancing within its throat. Its massive head lowered until they were almost eye to eye. This close, Jon felt dwarfed, more so than he had ever felt standing near One the giant. The dragon's scale plates interlocked with mesmerizing precision, each ridge sharp as a razor. Its eyes burned with a cunning ancient light. Jon inhaled slowly, allowing the connection to solidify. In that moment, he felt something shift deep within himself, as if a door had opened that he never knew existed. Energy crackled along his skin. The dragon's presence was a roiling thunderstorm, and he stood at its center, unscorched. Jon's mind reeled at the enormity of it. He did not know how he was doing this, only that it felt as though he had always had the capacity, but had been blind to it until now. He reached out a hand. The dragon let out a low growl, lips curling back from its fangs. A single sizzling droplet of saliva fell onto the stone floor, sending up a wisp of steam. But it did not lash out. Warily, the beast allowed Jon's hand to brush one of its scales, which were surprisingly warm, almost painfully so. Jon's mind surged, and he felt an alien sense of recognition flicker within the creature, as though it glimpsed in him something that mirrored itself. And then the dragon closed its eyes, issuing a low rumble that shook the cavern. Jon felt that rumble through his marrow, a wordless communion, an unspoken alliance. They stayed like that for a time, man and dragon in a silent bond. When Jon eventually turned to leave, the dragon let him go. He emerged from the cave, blinking in the harsh winter light, alive. Tormund and the others stared with mingled awe and terror. Jon only said, "It won't harm us." "How?" one of the Black brothers muttered, crossing himself as if warding off dark magic. Jon did not answer. How could he explain what even he barely understood? Instead, he gestured for them to follow him a short distance away to set camp. They needed time to process, and he needed time to think. Tormund could only shake his head, muttering, "I've seen some strange things north of the wall, but this is something new." That night, Jon could not sleep. Eventually, he found himself back at the cave, the stars bright overhead. Ghost padded silently at his side, tail twitching. Jon felt compelled to return to the dragon, to learn its secrets, to see if he could delve deeper into this new bond. In the moonlight, the scorched rocks took on a silver sheen. The dragon emerged from the shadows, wings rustling with a sound like rolling thunder. At first, Jon thought it meant to attack, but instead, it spread its wings wide, revealing the full magnificence of its form. Jon caught his breath. This was no ordinary beast. It was immense, at least as large as Drogon, if the stories of Daenerys' largest dragon were to be believed. But how had it gotten here? A stray egg? A hidden lineage of dragons in the far north, thriving in geothermal caverns? The question tugged at him, but it was overshadowed by wonder. Jon raised his hand, forging that mental connection once more. Instantly, he was transported into another vantage point, as though his eyes hovered behind the dragon's own. His heart pounded in time with that massive creature's. He felt the rush of savage pride, the simple yet powerful instincts to hunt, to dominate, to guard its lair. The mingling of their minds was more intense than warging with Ghost. This was a primordial, arcane bond. He felt the creature shift, as though testing him. A swirl of black wings, a gust of hot breath. Then it launched into the night sky with a leap that rattled the stone. Snow and ash plumed around them. Jon's perspective lurched. He stumbled, nearly collapsing. He realized with shock that he was seeing through the dragon's eyes as it soared into the darkness, the ground shrinking below. He heard a roaring wind, felt the crunch of freezing air on scalding scales. His physical body remained below, but part of his spirit flew with the dragon, riding that midnight current. For a moment, terror seized him. He could lose himself entirely, but he forced calm, focusing on staying tethered to his own body. Step by step he guided the dragon's flight, or perhaps the beast guided him. The night sky opened up, full of stars. Frost-laced clouds parted before the dragon's wings. Down below, the mountains glowed in pale moonlight, dwarfed by the immensity of the sky. Jon wanted to scream at the wonder of it. He felt unstoppable, primordial. Eventually, the dragon banked, sweeping down toward the cave. Jon's perspective whirled. The beast landed with a thunderous impact, sending gusts of heat rolling through the snow. Jon gasped, forcibly separating himself from the dragon's mind. The abruptness made him stagger, and Ghost barked in alarm, stepping closer to nudge his hand. The dragon stood there, smoke drifting from its nostrils. Then it stalked back into the dark recesses of the cave. Jon stayed outside, breathing heavily, every limb tingling as though charged by lightning. Ghost whined, tilting his head at Jon as if to say, "What in all the gods' names just happened?" Jon could only shake his head. He had never felt more alive, or more unsettled. They spent the next few days in uneasy vigil. Some of the men wanted to leave, to get away from that terror sleeping in the mountains. Others believed that controlling a dragon might offer them a chance to shift the balance of power in the north, to protect the wall in ways never before possible. Tormund's stance was pragmatic. He would follow Jon Snow, but he did not pretend to understand this sorcery. Meanwhile, Jon's bond with the dragon deepened. He visited it nightly, letting his consciousness slip into the beast's mind. He found that when he did so, Ghost reacted with confusion, occasionally growling as if in protest. Perhaps a man could only warg one creature at a time without risking some kind of split. But Jon pressed on, compelled by the sense that this was important. Urgent even. With each flight, he gained confidence, feeling the rush of wind under wings he did not physically possess, scanning the wild landscape with eyes that saw heat signatures dancing in the cold. On one such flight, he saw a flicker of movement along a frozen lake below. A group of wights, corpses in motion, The silent, lifeless army of the White Walkers lurched across the ice. The sight ignited the dragon's innate rage. A roar of fire burst from its jaws, scorching the night. Jon guided the beast's descent, feeling that primal satisfaction of incinerating the undead. When he separated it from the dragon's consciousness moments later, standing safely outside the cave with snow swirling around him, he felt elation. The others had brought terror to the living for too long. If this dragon could help fight them, then perhaps the realm had a new weapon. But with that elation came a sobering realization. One dragon alone might not be enough, especially if the rumors were true that Daenerys Targaryen commanded 3 die. If the Night King brought an army of thousands, this lonely beast, no matter how fierce, could not stand alone. Jon felt a distant pull to the south again, as though something in him recognized a kindred spirit in Daenerys dragons. And the thought of a union gave him pause. If House Targaryen truly ran in his veins, could he stand beside Daenerys, or even challenge her? He was not certain. But the North was his. His duty was to protect the realm. When he told Tormund and the others of the Whites he'd seen, their faces grew grave. "The dead are stirring again," Tormund said grimly. "We've got to warn your black brothers at the wall. Tell them to prepare. It's not just the living we need to worry about." Jon nodded. We'll bring word back. But first," he trailed off, glancing toward the dark maw of the dragon's lair. "You plan on taking that thing south?" Tormund asked, half in awe, half in dread. Jon flexed his jaw. "I don't know if I can. It's not a horse to be ridden at will. He struggled for words. "We share a connection, but it has its own mind. I doubt it will follow me blindly. Yet it could be the difference in the wars to come. If I can persuade it." Persuading a dragon was no small thing. As far as stories told, only Targaryens with a special bond ever truly commanded them. If Jon had that Targaryen blood, perhaps it was destiny. Or perhaps it was folly, and the dragon would burn them all to ash. Still, the desire to attempt it throbbed within him, growing stronger each night. He began to speak to the beast in low tones when it was calm, as though it could understand. Sometimes, he pressed his forehead to its scaled flank, feeling the crackle of heat in his bones. Once or twice, the dragon snapped at him in annoyance, forcing him to leap back. But no real harm was done. Trust, if that was even possible, required time. Meanwhile, Ghost grew restless. The direwolf often paced outside the cave, reluctant to enter. Jon sensed jealousy, perhaps. Or confusion. His Warg bond with Ghost was overshadowed by the new connection with the dragon, and Ghost seemed to feel that shift. Jon tried to reassure him, patting the wolf's thick fur, speaking gentle words. Yet the tension remained. At length, Jon decided they must return to the wall, if only to warn the Watch of the White's proximity and to gather more supplies. He summoned his men, who were all too eager to leave that foreboding place. But the question remained, would the dragon remain behind? And would Jon be able to maintain the bond from afar? He walked to the cave's entrance on the final morning, the frigid wind whipping at his cloak. The dragon lumbered out, massive wings stirring the dust. Jon felt a tug in his chest, an ache of separation before he even left. "I must go," he murmured, though he knew the words were meaningless to the beast. Nevertheless, the dragon swung its colossal head toward him, releasing a low rumble. Heat shimmered in the air. Their eyes locked. Jon closed his, focusing on that mental link. He poured his intent into it, images of the wall, of the dark threat stirring in the north, of the men who had come with him. He felt the dragon's wariness, its primal instincts, the lure of hunting and nesting in this volcanic cave. But there was also a flicker of kinship that transcended language. He wondered if the dragon understood that he intended to return, that he was not abandoning it, or if it cared. Perhaps they had formed only the faintest thread of a bond, easily broken by distance. Jon steeled himself for that possibility. He could do no more. As they turned south, leaving the scorched grounds behind, Jon threw one last glance over his shoulder. In the dawn light, the black dragon stood like a living monument of shadow and flame, smoke coiling from its nostrils. He sensed the creature watching them. A pang of longing settled in Jon's gut, but he forced himself to ride on. The journey back was quicker. They did not delve into the deeper wilderness but rather stuck to known paths. Yet the storms had grown fiercer, as though the land itself felt the White Walkers' icy breath. By the time they glimpsed the colossal mass of the wall in the distance, half their party was exhausted and battered. More than once, Jon had tried to slip into the dragon's mind at night, but the distance seemed too great. He caught only fleeting impressions, like faint echoes of a roaring presence. He felt a dull ache of loss. Castle Black was in turmoil upon their return. The nights were darker, the rumors of undead sightings more frequent. Brothers crowding the yard turned to watch as Jon and Tormund strode through the gate. Some whispered behind gloved hands. Jon wasted no time, summoning the senior officers to the common hall. There, by the flickering torches, he recounted what they had witnessed: a dragon north of the wall, and wights prowling near the Frostfang. His announcement was met with incredulity, fear, and shock. Some demanded proof. Others believed him instantly, having learned the hard way that the world still held many forgotten horrors. In the end, the vow was clear. Their duty was to protect the realms of men. If a dragon lurked beyond the wall, it was both a threat and a possible boon. If the undead were on the march again, they needed to prepare. Through it all, Jon felt a restlessness gnawing at him. An invisible tether pulled him north, even though he now stood among the familiar ramparts of Castle Black. As days passed, he found himself returning to the top of the wall each night, staring across the icy expanse, searching the skies for a silhouette that never appeared. He tried to focus on leadership, on training new recruits and reinforcing outposts. But he kept recalling the feeling of flight, the heat on his skin, the savage joy of unstoppable power. One night he dreamed of Bran, crippled and wise beyond his years, speaking words of prophecy. "You have the wolf in your blood, but also the dragon, Jon. The songs of ice and fire converge in you." Jon woke drenched in sweat. He could not deny it now. Perhaps he truly was both Stark and Targaryen. But did that matter if he remained bound to the Night's Watch, living a half-life? He thought of the vow, "It shall not end until my death." Melisandre once spoke of resurrection and prophecy. He had died once at the hands of the mutineers. So had that freed him from the vows? The memory twisted his gut. For a moment, he recalled the cold bite of steel in his belly, the blood spreading across the snow. If that counted as death, then perhaps he was already free of his oath. Perhaps he was not Lord Commander in spirit, only in name. That thought was both frightening and liberating. Despite these private misgivings, the daily routine continued. Jon tried to reassure the men that they had a plan. He began to organize supply runs. He sent ravens to the north, to Winterfell, where Sansa governed in his place, warning of the dead. He sent letters to any lords who might believe him, urging them to prepare. But a question rattled in his mind. What of Daenerys Targaryen? Word reached him that she had landed on Dragonstone. If she possessed 3 dragons, and he possessed some bond with a 4th, was it not wise to join forces? Could they not create a formidable alliance against the White Walkers? The thought tugged at him relentlessly. At last, a desire to go south became too overwhelming. With Tormund's help, Jon explained his decision to the Watch. He would travel to meet the Dragon Queen, seek her alliance, warn her of the threat. He gave command of the Watch, temporarily, to a capable ranger. Some of the Black Brothers murmured about desertion, about the vow. But there was also admiration in their eyes, respect for the man who had proven his resolve to protect the realm by any means necessary, even if it meant forging alliances beyond tradition. Jon promised to return if he was needed. Then, clad in black and gray fur, he set off south, Ghost at his side and a small escort of loyal companions behind him. The king in the north. The Targaryen bastard. The Warg who commanded a dragon. Rumors spread like wildfire in the north, preceding Jon wherever he traveled. They arrived at Winterfell to gather further men. Sansa greeted him on the battlements with relief in her eyes, though it was tempered by worry. "Is it true?" she asked in private. "Have you truly claimed a dragon as your own?" Jon pressed his lips together. "Claimed is too strong a word. I share a connection with it. But it remains wild, north of the wall." "Nine, I don't know." She stared at him, as if seeing him anew. If Mother were here to see this." He said nothing, for words failed him. Ned Stark's sense of honor and Catelyn Stark's fierce maternal presence were but memories. Yet, in that moment, Jon felt both close and distant, as though parted from them by more than just death. He had become something they might never have recognized. Still, the armies of the North needed a direction. Sansa insisted they focus on the threat of the White Walkers. Jon agreed, explaining that forging an alliance with Daenerys Targaryen, and possibly persuading her to bring her dragons to the north, was their best chance. The lords of the north were skeptical. Some demanded Jon remain to defend Winterfell. Others feared the Targaryen name. But Sansa, learning of the unstoppable might of dragons from old stories, stood with Jon in the Great Hall, persuading enough of them that they reluctantly agreed. Thus Jon set out once more, now with an entourage of northerners, heading down the King's Road toward Dragonstone. He left Sansa in charge, though they shared an emotional farewell. She seemed fearful she might never see him again, and he feared the same. But the die was cast. Traveling south felt surreal after so long at the Wall. The snows gradually lessened, replaced by cold rains. The forests grew more diverse, the roads more traveled. They passed through White Harbor, where the Manderleys pledged their support. They continued on, gathering looks of curiosity and awe from townsfolk who had heard rumors of the North's new champion, a Warg king with the blood of dragons in his veins. Jon did not relish the attention. It weighed on him, as did the uncertain reception he might receive from Daenerys Targaryen, who had her own claim to the Iron Throne. Eventually, a raven brought news that Daenerys was indeed at Dragonstone. She had summoned the lords of Westeros to bend the knee. Jon read the message with narrowed eyes. Bend the knee or else. He wondered. Perhaps an alliance was not guaranteed. Yet he had no choice but to try. They sailed from White Harbor across the narrow sea. The crossing was a trial for Ghost, who hated boats. Jon tried to soothe his direwolf, but Ghost growled and paced anxiously on the deck, large enough to cause the sailors to eye him warily. The wind whipped the sails, and the salt spray stung Jon's lips. He was no seafarer, but necessity forced him to endure. Dragonstone rose from the sea's mists, a craggy fortress shaped by ancient Valyrian sorcery. The black stone towers jutted like dragons' teeth. The castle looked both imposing and lonely, perched above the restless waves. Jon felt a peculiar resonance with it, as though the place recognized a part of him that was Targaryen. The men rowed him ashore, accompanied by Davos Seaworth, some loyal northern lords, and a handful of guards. Ghost leapt onto the sand with relief, shaking off the ocean spray. They climbed the steep pathway to the castle gates, flanked by unsullied soldiers in gleaming spears and shields. Their discipline was unnerving. They barely twitched when Ghost bared his teeth. The gates led them into a courtyard where Missandei of Endath and Grey Worm awaited, stone-faced. Jon introduced himself as king in the north, though he felt uncertain about wearing that title in front of the woman who claimed to be queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Missandei's soft voice guided them inside, through torchlit corridors where the air smelled of salt and stone. At last, they stood in the great hall of Dragonstone. A massive table shaped like Westeros dominated the center, and there, perched at the far side, was Daenerys Targaryen herself. Her silver-gold hair was braided in an elaborate style, and she wore a black gown embroidered with the three-headed dragon sigil of her house. Two of her dragons roared somewhere outside. Their presence felt even through the fortress walls. Jon's heart pounded at the sound, memories of his dragon stirring. Daenerys greeted him courteously enough, but there was an edge in her voice. She wanted fealty, a knee bent. Jon in turn spoke of the coming war against the dead, urging her to focus on the existential threat. She listened, her expression cool. Tyrion Lannister stood at her side, regarding Jon with curiosity. Varys lingered in the shadows, silent and inscrutable. "I've heard tales of you, Jon Snow," Daenerys said. "They say you were dead and came back, that you ride direwolves as if they were loyal hounds, and now I hear rumors you can command a dragon, that you might be my kin?" She tilted her head, eyes narrowed. "Is this some trick of the North to gain my favor, or is there truth in these wild stories?" Jon steeled himself, ignoring the weight of that question. "I can't prove my parentage to you, Your Grace. What I can say is that I've seen a dragon beyond the wall with my own eyes, I've forged a bond of sorts with it. He paused, glancing at Tyrion's doubtful expression. But that's not why I'm here. The Night King and his army are marching south. The wall won't hold them forever. If we don't unite, the living will fall. Daenerys considered him for a long moment. You speak of unity, but you have not acknowledged my claim to the throne. My father was the last Targaryen to sit on the Iron Throne. You, if what they say is true, could be his grandson. But do you come to swear loyalty? Or do you merely seek my dragons for your own war? Tension coiled in the hall. Ghost growled softly at Jon's side, reading the room's hostility. Davos cleared his throat, opening his mouth to speak, but Jon raised a hand to quiet him. I did not come to claim the throne. The North fought for independence. My father, my uncle, Ned Stark, was loyal to House Targaryen until King Aerys burned him alive. I have no interest in old feuds. We face an enemy that doesn't care about crowns. I'm asking for your help, not your crown. Her lilac eyes flickered with something unreadable. Perhaps uncertainty, perhaps curiosity. Tyrion took a step forward. Your Grace, if the rumors of the White Walkers are true, we cannot ignore them. Jon Snow is not known for deception. Nels? Daenerys took a slow breath. I have fought many battles to reach these shores, endured betrayal and loss. But I am not blind to the threat of the dead. I have seen the power of darkness in Essos. You say you can command a dragon. Which one? Where is it? Why have I not seen it? Jon hesitated. It's north of the wall. It belongs to no one, not truly. But I share a bond with it. I can sense it. Sometimes enter its mind as a warg might. If I had the means, I would bring it here. The Queen's eyebrows rose. Bring it here? You mean to ride it? Like my ancestors did in the Age of Conquest? No. Jon let out a slow exhale, feeling the weight of that question. I don't know if that's possible, but if it is, I believe it's our best hope against the Night King. Silence fell. Then Daenerys stood, stepping around the table. Show me, she said quietly, though her tone carried the force of command. Warg into your dragon now if you can. Jon swallowed. The distance was vast. He had tried on the ship at night, and only felt faint whispers of the beast's mind. But Daenerys demanded proof. He moved to a quieter corner of the hall, kneeling on the cold stone floor, Ghost at his side. The gathered lords and advisors looked on, uncertain. Jon closed his eyes, emptying his thoughts. He sought that bond, the mental link that had flared so powerfully when he stood in the dragon's presence. At first he felt nothing except the faint scratching of his own mind. Then, like a distant rumble of thunder, he sensed the creature's presence. Flickers of warmth, of molten emotion. He pressed deeper, ignoring the beads of sweat forming on his brow. The distance strained him. It was like trying to hear a whisper in a storm. But the bond still existed. He caught a glimpse of dark stone, the smell of sulfur. The dragon was in its lair, stirring restlessly. A surge of triumph raced through Jon. Carefully, he molded his thoughts, sending a mental call. He felt the beast shift, felt its confusion, its roiling hunger. Then abruptly he lost contact, as if a door slammed shut. He exhaled sharply, snapping back into his body. Daenerys watched him, her expression unreadable. What did you see? It's still in the cave north of the wall. Jon rasped, voice shaky from the strain. It's, uneasy, hungry. I tried to summon it in a sense, but the distance might be too great. A flicker of disappointment crossed the Queen's face. Then she schooled it into neutrality. I believe you're sincere, Jon Snow. The real question is whether this bond can be of use to us in the war. If there truly is a dragon in the north, we need it, and we need the north. I will not demand your knee tonight. But prove to me you can bring this dragon here, or find another way to unite our forces, and I will help you fight the White Walkers. Now under. Jon stood, trying not to let relief flood his features. Thank you, Your Grace. Her gaze flicked to Ghost. You keep strange company, Jon Snow. She turned to her advisors. We shall feast this evening in our guest's honor, and then we'll decide our course of action. That night, in the hall of Dragonstone, they dined on fresh fish and roasted vegetables, a luxury for those from the frigid north. The atmosphere was stiff with mutual suspicion. Daenerys asked many questions about the White Walkers, how they fought, how they might be killed, how far their armies spread. Jon answered as best he could, emphasizing the role of dragonglass and Valyrian steel. He mentioned that Dragonstone sat upon a mountain of dragonglass, which could be mined. Daenerys agreed in principle, though she wanted to see a demonstration of its use against an actual white. Tyrion engaged Davos in conversation about the politics of the North. Varys mostly observed, sipping wine and occasionally interjecting with a pointed question. Missandei smiled politely at the Northerners' awkward attempts at courtesy. As the night wore on, Jon found himself stealing glances at Daenerys. She possessed a regal bearing, tempered by compassion, overshadowed by an undercurrent of loss and fierce ambition. He sensed a kindred spirit in her, one shaped by adversity. But her claim to the throne was something he found hard to reconcile with his own sense of northern independence. Still, there were bigger threats. Perhaps they could forge an alliance that transcended petty matters of crowns. When the meal ended, Daenerys pulled Jon aside. They walked along the cliffs where the ocean roared below, the sky overhead studded with stars. Torchlight flickered, revealing the queen's contemplative expression. "I want to trust you," she said softly, crossing her arms against the chill. "But trust does not come easily to me. If this dragon is real, if you have the power you claim, then that changes much. Yet if it's all a trick..." Jon held her gaze. "It's no trick. I wouldn't have traveled all this way to lie. My only concern is that the war with the White Walkers will consume us if we don't stand together." She nodded, the salt wind whipping her braids. "Then let us find a way to prove this threat is real. To me, to the other houses. Bring evidence, if you must. Show them the undead can be defeated only if we unite. And if you can bring your dragon south." She trailed off, the possibilities clear in her eyes. Jon wondered if the great black beast would come. How could he coax it beyond the wall? The notion filled him with uncertainty but also a strange hope. "I'll try." They parted ways, Daenerys returning to the castle's warmth, Jon lingering on the cliffs with Ghost at his side. Waves hammered the rocks below, sending up a cool spray. Jon inhaled deeply, steeling himself. He would have to return north once more, this time with a mission that was as bold as it was insane. To bring a living white south to prove the threat, and possibly to bring a living dragon too. Setting out from Dragonstone, Jon made for Eastwatch by the Sea, a Night's Watch castle on the eastern tip of the wall. Daenerys granted him a small escort of Unsullied and a few Dothraki scouts, though both groups eyed the frigid north with distaste. Tyrion accompanied them too, curious about the realm and eager to see the truth of Jon's warnings. Davos remained at Jon's side, as did Ghost, who had grown more tolerant of sea voyages. The plan was twofold: capture a white for proof, and attempt to coax the dragon from its lair, if it still lingered there. Tormund awaited them at Eastwatch, surprised to see a band of Unsullied in black leather armor step ashore. He greeted Jon warmly but cast a skeptical eye at Tyrion and the others. "Saw it with my own eyes," Tormund said, once they were settled around a brazier for warmth. "Your dragon, it's real enough, but it's wild, Jon. I not place bets on leading it anywhere it doesn't want to go." Jon nodded gravely. "I know, but I must try." They formed a small expedition to venture inland. Jon, Tormund, Tyrion, Davos, a handful of Unsullied and several wildlings who knew the terrain. Their first goal: find a white, and somehow haul it back alive. It was a mad scheme, but they had no better proof to offer the southern lords. Within 2 days, they found what they sought: a small group of the undead shambling across a frozen river. A risky skirmish ensued, steel clashing with the brittle bones of the whites. Ghost leapt among them, jaws snapping. The Unsullied fought with discipline, slicing off limbs until only one white remained intact enough to move. They subdued it, binding it with heavy chains while it screeched and clacked its teeth. Even Tyrion, who had witnessed many horrors, went pale at the sight. "God save us," he whispered. "You weren't exaggerating." But their victory drew attention from the others. A horn blast echoed over the ice. Blue-eyed silhouettes emerged in the distance, riding dead horses. The party fled, dragging their captive white, hearts pounding. Jon felt the chill of the White Walkers more keenly than ever before, as if they recognized him. He half expected the Night King to appear. But the others held back, perhaps wary of the Valyrian steel Jon wielded in Longclaw. They escaped, though the tension remained, thrumming in their veins. Next came the second goal, the dragon. Jon led a smaller group toward the Frostfangs, where Tormund had found the lair. Snow whipped across the rocky slopes, swirling in eddies. The air smelled of sulfur. Tyrion's eyes widened when they saw the blackened ground before the cave, littered with bones. The echoes of the wind combined with the faint rumble of a sleeping beast. Jon took a deep breath, glancing at Tyrion, Davos, and Tormund. "Wait here," he ordered. "This may go badly if too many of us enter at once." They nodded, grim-faced. Jon walked alone, Ghost at his side, stepping into the mouth of the cave. The warmth of the volcanic vents and the pungent stench of sulfur enveloped him. The darkness pressed in, lit only by the faint glow of the dragon's internal flame. Then he saw it, the massive form curled on the cavern floor, wings draped around it like a cloak of night. The dragon's head rose at Jon's approach, eyes glowing in the gloom. Jon closed his eyes, reaching out mentally. That old connection flared, a rush of sensation nearly overwhelming him. He felt the dragon's hunger, its territorial wariness, its primal loneliness. He projected calm, images of flight, of fire used against the undead threat. He showed the beast flickers of the whites, recalled the savage satisfaction of incinerating them. The dragon stirred, rumbled, and rose on its haunches. Smoke curled from its jaws. Slowly, cautiously, Jon approached, laying a hand on its scaled flank. The beast grumbled but did not pull away. He felt its breath, hot as a forge, stirring his hair. Carefully, he moved along its side until he reached the base of its neck. His heart pounded. Was this madness? He remembered stories of the Valyrians, how they rode dragons, forging an empire of fire. Daenerys had done so, if rumors were true. Could he do the same? Jon climbed. The dragon hissed, shifting beneath him, nearly throwing him off. He clung to a ridge of scales, heart hammering. But through their bond he projected reassurance, unity of purpose. The beast let out a low roar that shook the cave walls. Then it began to move toward the entrance, wings scraping the rock. Jon's muscles quivered with tension, half convinced he would be dashed against the cavern floor. A sudden burst of sunlight blinded him as the dragon emerged into the open. The wind howled over the rocky clearing. Tyrion, Davos, and Tormund gaped, stumbling backward in terror and awe as the black dragon strode forward, carrying Jon Snow upon its back. Ghost barked and bounded away, tail lowered. The dragon spread its colossal wings, beating them once, twice, stirring a gale of snow and ash. Jon clung desperately, arms trembling. He felt the rush of the beast's power through their mental link. Then, with a mighty leap, the dragon launched itself into the air, claws scraping rock, wind roaring around them. Jon's stomach lurched as they rose, soared above the craggy peaks. Fear and exhilaration crashed through him. The ground fell away, the sky opened wide, and he realized he was truly flying. He heard Tormund whooping below, saw Tyrion's tiny figure shading his eyes. Davos stood transfixed. Ghost was a white blot against the dark landscape. The dragon climbed higher, wings pummeling the thin air. Jon's heart thundered so fiercely he thought it might burst. Yet he could not suppress a shout of joy. They soared over the Frostfangs, the glaciers glinting in the pale sunlight. The wind buffeted Jon's face, cold enough to steal his breath, yet the dragon's body radiated warmth. He felt unstoppable, a being of myth. But he also remembered the purpose of this flight. They had to bring this power south, to unite with Daenerys' dragons, to burn the army of the dead to cinders. After a time, the dragon descended, wings sweeping wide. Jon guided it toward the clearing where his companions waited, though guided might be too strong a word. He nudged, and the beast complied at least partially. The landing was jarring, throwing up plumes of snow. Jon slid off, knees weak. The dragon stared at the newcomers, huffing smoke. Tyrion raised both hands slowly, eyes shining with wonder. Davos' mouth was agape. Tormund merely roared with laughter, as if the sight was too grand for words. Jon, breathless, turned to them. "It's real. We can do it. We'll bring it south." "How?" Tyrion asked, voice trembling with excitement and unease. "Will it just follow us?" Jon rested a hand on the dragon's flank, feeling the thunder of its breath. We share a bond. It won't be easy, but I think it will come with us. We have to move carefully. Flying is one thing, but we'll need to cross miles of land. Tormund snorted. Carefully indeed, lest it get bored and burn us all. Jon offered a thin smile. Let's go then. The sooner we're back at Eastwatch, the sooner we can sail south. Now, Daniel. The march to Eastwatch was tense, but the dragon followed, mostly because it chose to fly overhead, occasionally circling the party with an ear-splitting roar that scattered wildlife for leagues. Whenever it landed, Jon approached, maintaining their bond. He realized the beast had no name, for it was not a mere pet but a primordial force. Yet in his mind he found himself calling it Shadowfire, for the black scales and the swirling heat it exuded. He did not speak the name aloud, not yet. At Eastwatch, the sight of a full-grown dragon descending onto the frosty shoreline threw the garrison into pandemonium. The men scrambled to man the walls, archers knocked arrows and horns blared. Jon had to ride Ghost out ahead, waving his arms to show he was in control, or something close to it. When the panic subsided, the men stared in awe, many crossing themselves and whispering prayers. Loading the White and the Dragon aboard ships bound for Dragonstone was another matter altogether. The White was sealed in a sturdy wooden crate, chains bound tight. The Dragon refused to be confined, of course, and would not land on any vessel. Finally, Jon decided that he and a small group would sail ahead, while the Dragon followed overhead, if it chose to. It was a risk. Perhaps the beast would wander off. But forcing it was impossible. In an astonishing display, the black dragon soared above the fleet, occasionally plunging down to pluck fish from the sea, its dark wings glinting in the sun. Sailors gawked in terror and fascination. Ghost, again, paced the deck, though he seemed somewhat calmer, as if accepting that Jon was still his pack leader despite the new bond. Jon watched the horizon, heart clenched with tension, praying that the dragon would not abandon them. It did not. It stayed, following the ships to Dragonstone. As they neared the island, Daenerys' own dragons appeared, circling the skies with piercing shrieks. For a moment, Jon feared a territorial conflict. The three dragons, Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion, roared challenges, banking over the water in a grand aerial dance. But Jon closed his eyes, linking with his black dragon, projecting caution and respect. He sensed the Targaryen dragon's confusion at this outsider, but no immediate hostility. The sight that greeted them at Dragonstone's cliffs was one of pure marvel, 4 dragons in the sky, weaving around each other with guttural calls. Daenerys stood on a parapet, hair whipped by the wind, gazing up in awe. She cast an astonished look at Jon as he disembarked, the caged White rattling and shrieking nearby, the black dragon swooping overhead. "Gods!" she breathed. "It's beautiful and terrible." Jon's voice was low, resonant with the weight of the moment. "We'll need all the help we can get. The Night King won't stand idle. The war is coming." Daenerys tore her gaze from the sky, meeting Jon's eyes. "Then, let us prepare for it, together." He nodded solemnly. For the first time since he had accepted the call of that distant presence in his blood, Jon Snow felt a glimmer of hope. Dragons soared overhead, united at last, and below, men gathered to face a horror beyond comprehension. The stage was set for an epic confrontation of ice and fire. And in Jon's veins, wolf and dragon blood coursed in tandem, forging a destiny he could never have imagined. He looked up into the sky, watching as his black-scaled companion circled with Daenerys' children, flames flickering in the twilight. He felt the creature's fierce spirit brush against his own, a silent promise of loyalty, of power. And though the night ahead was dark, Jon Snow dared to believe that, in the union of dragon and wolf, the realm might yet be saved from eternal winter. Jon could not recall a time in his life when he had felt both exhilaration and dread in such fierce equality. The black dragon, sometimes called Shadowfire in hushed tones by a few in his company, though Jon himself had rarely spoken the name aloud, cut a mesmerizing figure against the sky. Beside Daenerys' own trio, the creature embodied the raw, furious might of ancient Valyria, existing as a testament that the Age of Dragons had not truly ended. And yet, for Jon, there was little time to stand in awe of this living wonder. Duty called, louder than it ever had before. The White rattling in its wooden cage made for a stark reminder that death itself now marched, requiring every ounce of mortal strength, courage and cunning to hold it at bay. They lowered the crate carefully onto the stony plateau of Dragonstone's courtyard. The white inside hissed, jaw clacking, and the chains rattling as it scrabbled at the sides. Even Tyrion stepped back, eyes wide with unease. Daenerys, standing nearby with arms crossed, regarded the crate with a mixture of horror and fascination. Her blood might carry fire, but this was a new enemy, one without fear or mercy. In the distance, Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion wheeled above the sea, their roars echoing across the waves. Shadowfire, for its part, perched on a craggy outcropping near the fortress walls, emitting a low rumbling growl that vibrated the very stones underfoot. Jon stood with Ghost by his side, feeling the tension in the air as tangibly as the wind. He commanded a few of the Unsullied to remove the chains that secured the crate lid. The men hesitated. They had seen what the undead monstrosity was capable of. But they obeyed, unfastening each bolt with careful precision. The moment the last chain was loosened, the lid crashed open from within, sending splinters of wood clattering onto the stones. A ragged figure flailed out, its eyes an icy blue that seemed to devour the daylight. Its mouth gaped, releasing no true sound but a wet rasp that set everyone's nerves on edge. It lunged at the nearest living flesh, only to be yanked short by the manacles around its wrists and ankles, chains still attached to the floor of the crate. Daenerys inhaled sharply. Missandei, standing at her side, pressed a hand to her mouth. Even Grey Worm, the pinnacle of composure, wore an expression of alarm. Tyrion took a careful step forward as if to study the creature. The white skin was an ashen gray blue, torn in places to reveal blackened sinew and bone. Davos swore under his breath, spitting to ward off evil. Tormund simply eyed the thing with grim distaste, one hand resting on the hilt of his axe. Jon felt the hair on his neck rise. Even after all his experiences, fighting White Walkers at Hardhome, witnessing corpses rise on the battlefield, he never grew accustomed to the sheer wrongness of the undead. This was a foe beyond any mortal threat he had ever faced. Daenerys looked at Jon. "It truly is dead." Her voice was quiet, nearly lost under the whites chattering and the roar of the dragons overhead. Jon nodded. "And there are thousands more. Tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. An entire army, led by beings who wield ice like living weapons. We face extinction if we do not unite." She regarded him a long moment, her expression one of renewed gravity. "I have seen many horrors in my life. Slavery, dark sorcery, men who believe themselves gods. But this is a nightmare beyond comprehension." She gestured sharply, and Grey Worm and his Unsullied advanced, lifting their spears to corral the white back into the crate. After several tense moments, they managed to maneuver the creature inside once more, though the stench of decay lingered in the courtyard. Daenerys' gaze never left Jon's. "If what you say is true, we have precious little time." Tyrion cleared his throat. "We must show this to the lords of Westeros, Cersei especially, if we hope to bring her armies into the fold. Although the idea of Cersei Lannister cooperating with anyone is, let's say, improbable. But perhaps even she can't deny this reality when faced with it." Daenerys curled her fingers around the parapet edge, her knuckles turning white. "I was preparing to march on King's Landing, to break the wheel that has ground the people of Westeros into dust. But if I march my army south to fight another war, and this undead threat invades the north unchecked." Jon straightened, meeting her troubled gaze. "We don't have the luxury of multiple wars. We have one war, the only one that truly matters. My lords in the north will fight, but alone, we can't prevail. We need the might of every living soul in these lands. Whether we like it or not, that includes Queen Cersei, the Tyrell remnants, the Stormlands, Dorne, anyone who can hold a sword or spear." Daenerys' expression tightened, and for a moment Jon feared she might refuse. She was a conqueror by nature, shaped by fire and hardship. Yet the shock of seeing the undead seemed to weigh heavily on her. "Then we must make our case. Let us request an armistice, one that allows us to present this white before the powers of Westeros." She cast a look at Tyrion, who nodded gravely. "I have no illusions that my sister will welcome me with open arms," the dwarf said. "But perhaps if we arrange a meeting on neutral ground, perhaps the Dragon Pit in King's Landing, we can show her exactly what we face." If she sees this creature and still refuses to help, then there is no hope for her or anyone following her. Now try it. Jon listened, a knot of tension easing in his chest. This was a plan, risky, but a plan nonetheless. There's another matter, he said quietly, glancing toward the sky. Shadowfire perched atop a rocky spur, tail lashing slowly. My dragon, this dragon, remains unpredictable. I can connect with it, sometimes guide it, but it won't be pinned or ordered around. Daenerys followed his gaze, her expression softened by a flicker of curiosity. You speak of it as yours, yet you also say it's wild. Which is it? Jon's breath caught in his throat. I'm its rider, or as close as anyone can be who isn't a true Targaryen by name. But in truth, it belongs to no one, like you said. Dragons are not slaves. Daenerys gave a faint smile, remembering the phrase she once used in Essos. Indeed they are not. Her eyes then darted to Drogon, Rhaegal and Viserion, still circling overhead. My children, they have accepted me as their mother. But they are as free as the wind, even if they choose to fight alongside me. I'd never chain them again. Neither may I. Jon dipped his head in a slight nod. If we bring 4 dragons to a meeting in King's Landing, we risk provoking a terrified reaction from every soldier in the city. And what if they shoot at them with scorpions or other contraptions? The Lannisters had Qyburn forging new weapons, if rumors are to be believed. Tyrion exhaled. They have indeed. We must tread carefully. Perhaps not all dragons should come. A show of force, yes, but not something that leads to panic or open conflict. We want them to see reason. Daenerys folded her arms. It's a delicate balance. For now, let us deal with the immediate next step, sending word to King's Landing. I'll have ravens dispatched, requesting a parley in the dragon pit. If Cersei agrees, we'll bring the white as proof. Jon, we'll need you there. I suspect you're the only one she might trust not to lie about the threat. She hates Tyrion far too much, and she doesn't know me. But you're the king in the north, or so the tales say. No. Jon pressed his lips together. I'll go. But I can't promise anything about the dragon. If it feels threatened, it might lash out. If it chooses to remain in the skies or on some distant cliff, so be it. I can't simply command it like a trained hawk. Niaene. Daenerys rested a hand lightly on Jon's arm. We'll do the best we can. The fate of the realm hangs on convincing Cersei that this isn't some grand ploy to unseat her. Tormund let out a snort of dark laughter. We're trying to stop an army of the dead. She can have her damn throne if it matters so much, but if she doesn't join us, none of us will have much left to rule. The wind gusted across the courtyard carrying the salt spray from the cliffs below. For a moment all fell silent, save the intermittent roar of dragons above, and the clatter of the White's chains from its crate. Jon cast a lingering look at the caged horror, remembering Hardhome, the terror in the free folk's eyes as the dead rose from the icy water. The memory still haunted him. But now, perhaps for the first time, they had a chance to unite the living around a single purpose. They set to work. Missandei and Tyrion composed messages, writing swiftly under torchlight in one of Dragonstone's war rooms, while ravens waited in the rookery. Grey Worm oversaw the safe chaining of the crate, ensuring it could be transported without risking the White's escape. Daenerys met privately with Jon, discussing strategies for the upcoming parley. Across the fortress, soldiers and attendants readied for a new kind of war, one fought not by swords and sieges alone, but by truth. Still, the hum of tension never abated. Shadowfire's presence loomed over them all, a constant reminder that magic and myth had returned to Westeros in force. While the preparations were underway, Jon took a quiet moment to slip outside. The dragon had claimed a perch near a half-collapsed watchtower on the northern edge of the island, a place of jagged rocks that jutted up from the sea. Ghost accompanied Jon, the direwolf's ears back as they approached. Overhead, the sky glowed with the last embers of dusk, painting the clouds a deep purple. The air was cold, though warmer than the north, and smelled of brine. Shadowfire lay curled with its wings half draped over the ruined stone, its golden eyes half lidded. At Jon's approach, the dragon lifted its head, releasing a low, rumbling growl that was neither friendly nor hostile. Jon's heart pounded, and he could sense the living furnace that was the dragon's core, even from several paces away. He inhaled, closing his eyes briefly to summon the bond. It swelled inside him, this arcane link that made him more than a mere warg. Ghost was there too, a comforting presence, but overshadowed by the dragon's vast consciousness. Each time Jon touched that immense mind, he felt a risk of losing himself to the primal force, the sheer ancient fury of it. But he had learned to hold on to his own identity. He approached carefully, resting a hand on the dragon's flank, feeling the heat radiate through the black scales. "Soon we'll head south," he murmured, though he doubted the creature understood the words. The meaning, perhaps, might transcend mere language. "We have to show them what's coming. I don't know if you'll follow me all the way, but I hope you will." The dragon rumbled, shifting under his touch. In the bond, Jon sensed curiosity, hunger, and that underlying note of aggression that never truly vanished. More and more, he suspected that the creature fed off the geothermal vents in the far north, or perhaps it was drawn there by some ancient tie. Yet it had followed him here, to Dragonstone, an isle known for its volcanic activity. That gave him hope. If the dragon found enough warmth to sustain it, perhaps it would remain. Ghost let out a low whine, and Jon turned to see the direwolf stepping back from the dragon's tail. Even as Ghost was loyal to Jon, he remained uneasy around this massive beast of scale and claw. Jon parted from the dragon's side and crouched to stroke Ghost's thick white fur. "It's all right," he murmured. "Nothing can come between us. You know that." Ghost blinked his red eyes slowly, a sign of trust, though he stayed watchful. Man, wolf, and dragon stood on the edge of the world, the sea crashing below, the stars emerging one by one overhead. When Jon returned to the main fortress, Daenerys' household bustled like a beehive. Soldiers prepared ships, hauling crates of supplies. The Stormcrows, a sellsword company loyal to the Dragon Queen, sharpened their blades in the courtyard. Several Dothraki wandered the halls, uneasy with so much stone overhead. Tyrion was meticulously reviewing the plan with Davos. Meanwhile, Daenerys herself stood on a balcony overlooking the sea, arms folded tight against her chest. Jon approached quietly, nodding to Missandei, who excused herself. He joined the queen at the balustrade. "The ravens have been sent," Daenerys said without preamble. "If Cersei is wise, she'll at least hear us out. If not, we'll have to find another way." "No." Jon listened to the surf below, taking in the slight tension in Daenerys' voice. "Cersei Lannister has never been known for kindness or wisdom, but if she refuses to meet, we can't force her to believe." Daenerys' gaze traveled across the dark waters. "In Essos, I had to break chains to free the slaves. Here in Westeros, the chains seem more metaphorical. Old loyalties, feuds, grudges, fears. If this war with the dead is to be won, we might need to break those chains as well." Jon absorbed her words. "We'll need more than words, Your Grace. We'll need feats that people can't ignore. 4 dragons, that alone might make them tremble. The white we carry will prove there's a threat. But people's hearts are often hardened. They'll cling to old hatreds until the very end." "No." She turned to him, her expression gentling. "I wish there was more time for us to understand each other, Jon Snow. You carry yourself like a Stark, but the blood in your veins might be Targaryen. Tyrion believes you were born of Rhaegar, my brother. Does that trouble you?" Jon hesitated, his pulse quickening. The rumors persisted, though he tried not to dwell on them. Ned Stark had always been his father in his heart, no matter the truth. "It doesn't matter what blood I have," he said softly. "The only thing that matters is keeping the living alive." She seemed to accept that, at least for now. A long silence stretched between them before she spoke again. "We should rest. Tomorrow, we set sail. If the weather is fair, we'll make for Blackwater Bay in a few days' time, and then we face a queen who may not wish to share her realm." Jon inclined his head. "Agreed." As he departed, he couldn't help but feel the weight of destiny pressing on him, as though the ghosts of the Targaryen dynasty watched from the shadows. The notion unnerved him, but he forced it aside. No crown or prophecy mattered if the world itself was snuffed out by endless winter. That night, he had a dream. He stood in the courtyard of Winterfell, snow drifting down in thick, silent sheets. The heart tree loomed nearby, its crimson leaves swirling like embers in a white abyss. From the darkness, Bran emerged, his eyes milky white. And then, behind Bran, came a dragon made of moonlight and shadow, a shape so vast it blotted out the sky. Jon heard whispers of voices, and Stark, Robb, Lyanna, Rhaegar, a chorus of the dead. And in the reflection of the dragon's eyes, he saw the Night King's face, pale and cold. He jerked awake, drenched in sweat, the morning light creeping through the shutters of his chamber. Ghost lay on the floor beside his bed, ears perked. Jon's heart thundered. He could not recall the precise words he heard in the dream, but the sense of urgency lingered like a dagger poised at his throat. By midday, their small fleet set sail from Dragonstone. Daenerys commanded the largest vessel, with Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion all taking flight to circle overhead or perch on the ship's masts when the wind grew still. Shadowfire maintained a wary distance, often skimming the water's surface and snatching fish in its massive jaws. Jon and his northern escort were stationed on a stout ship near Daenerys, the caged wight bolted to the deck under constant guard. Tormund stood watch with a grim face, muttering how this was the strangest venture he had ever undertaken, capturing a corpse to show to southern lords who might not even believe their own eyes. The days passed with an almost unnerving smoothness. The sea remained calm, the winds favorable. Jon spent hours on deck, gazing out at the horizon, scanning for anything amiss. Each evening, he attempted to touch minds with Shadowfire, ensuring the dragon did not decide to vanish. That tenuous bond still pulsed in his blood, though distance could easily thin it. It seemed that the Black Dragon was content to follow the other three, though occasionally it took an entirely different path, forcing Jon to lean against the ship's rail in worried contemplation until he spotted it again, a dark shape against the twilight sky. When at last they approached the mouth of the Blackwater, anxiety suffused every vessel in the fleet. Daenerys' ships bore her dragon banners, ensuring that any watchers from King's Landing could see who neared. Tyrion stood near the prow of Daenerys' ship, dwarfed by the tall figure of Grey Worm at his side, wondering aloud whether Cersei would greet them with wildfire and arrows. The city sprawled before them in the distance, its walls formidable, the Red Keep perched high upon its rocky outcropping. Even from here, one could sense the tension, a city bracing for the arrival of a queen with dragons. To minimize panic, Daenerys decided that not all dragons would land at once. Viserion and Rhaegal would remain airborne at a higher altitude, out of range of most siege weapons, while Drogon accompanied her as a personal mount. Shadowfire, unpredictable as it was, circled far to the east. Jon tried to maintain calm, feeling that if the Black Dragon sensed immediate danger or hostility, it might unleash a torrent of flame on the city. That would end their negotiations before they even began. They anchored outside the range of the scorpions rumored to line the city walls. A small rowboat took Tyrion, Davos, and an envoy of Unsullied ashore to announce their arrival and confirm whether Cersei would indeed allow a parley in the dragon pit. Hours dragged by. The day was hot, the sky glaringly bright. The white in its crate scratched and hissed, occasionally letting out a ghastly moan. Ghost prowled the deck, uneasy with so many people and the stench of salt and decay in close quarters. Finally, Tyrion returned with word. Cersei would grant them passage to the dragon pit, under the condition that Daenerys bring only a small retinue and refrain from letting all 4 dragons descend upon the city. Daenerys agreed, though she bristled at the demand. "She means to weaken our display of power," the queen observed, standing on the deck in her black and silver attire. "Yet we cannot appear too dangerous, or we risk open conflict." Jon nodded, adjusting the black cloak over his shoulders. He wore no crown, but the northern sigil was emblazoned on his breast. "The white is what matters. We show it to Cersei and we hope she believes. If she doesn't, then we'll have to find another way." The next morning they moved into the city. The battered gates permitted them entry, and a contingent of Lannister guards escorted them to the dragon pit at the top of the Hill of Rhaenys. The walk felt surreal. Streets that once teemed with common folk now seemed subdued, shutters closed, curious eyes peering from cracks in doorways. Overhead, Drogon soared with a thunderous roar, while Shadowfire maintained a wide circle, watchful. Occasionally, one of Daenerys' other dragons passed overhead, a dark shape against the sun, but they did not descend. The presence of these winged terrors set the city on edge. Jon kept close watch on the crate bearing the undead. Tormund and a group of Unsullied lugged it on poles, the creature within thrashing like a rabid animal. Davos marched nearby, scanning the rooftops for any threat. Tyrion walked at Daenerys' side, offering quiet counsel. Missandei trailed behind, face composed though her eyes flickered with nerves. Grey Worm led a small detachment of Unsullied, each man disciplined and silent. At the gates of the Dragon Pit, a wide open-air ruin that once housed the Targaryen's dragons, more Lannister soldiers stood in formation, swords gleaming. Jaime Lannister was there, clad in gilded armor, expression grim. Next to him, looking statuesque and cold, was Cersei Lannister herself, draped in black, a metal coronet resting on her golden hair. Beside Cersei was Qyburn, face neutral but eyes flickering with curiosity. The mountain loomed behind them, a hulking undead giant of a man encased in dark armor. Tension crackled as the two parties converged. Daenerys approached on foot, flanked by Drogon's imposing presence behind her. The dragon landed on a broken wall of the pit, kicking up dust and rubble. The queen's silver-gold hair fluttered in the sudden gust of wind. Cersei lifted her chin, trying to appear unimpressed, though her posture was rigid. Jaime glanced uncertainly between the two queens and Jon Snow. Bronn stood off to one side, leaning on a spear, his features carefully composed to hide any fear or shock. The air was scorching, as if the city itself sweated under the weight of history. Cersei's voice cut through the hush. So, the usurper's daughter returns to the scene of her ancestors' crimes, and she brings with her the king in the north, who declared independence. Her gaze flicked over Jon. I assume you've come to bend the knee, or perhaps to show off your monstrosities. She spared a glance at Drogon, then at the large crate carried by the Unsullied. Daenerys forced a small smile, though her eyes flared with indignation. We've come to show you the truth, Your Grace. If you doubt our words, see for yourself. The army of the dead marches on us all. Nainwara. Cersei folded her arms. I've heard these wild stories, tales of white demons walking corpses. Why should I believe them? More to the point, why should I interrupt my war for the throne on account of your fantasies? Tyrion, ever the diplomat, spoke up. We have proof, Your Grace, something that will end all doubt. Allow us to present it, then you can decide whether to proceed. For a moment, Cersei's lip curled with disdain, but curiosity won out. She gave a terse nod. Jon gestured to Tormund and the Unsullied, who set the crate down near the center of the pit. A hush fell across the gathering. Even the dragons seemed to hold their breath. Jon lifted a heavy iron latch, stepping back. Tormund and Davos both drew short swords, ready in case the white broke free. The lid crashed open. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a blur of movement erupted. The white screeched, launching itself from the crate, chains rattling. It lunged at the nearest living soul, Jaime, who stumbled backward, drawing his sword. The undead's jaws snapped, blackened fingers clawing at the air. Gasps and curses erupted from every corner. Sir Gregor, the mountain, stepped forward, but the white paid him no heed, fixated on the living warmth all around. Only the heavy chain around its waist prevented it from sinking its rotted teeth into Jaime's throat. Cersei took a rapid step back, eyes widening. Qyburn's face lit with a twisted fascination. He moved closer, ignoring the danger, transfixed by the undead creature. Jon advanced, grabbing a chain with gloved hands. He yanked the white toward the center, wrestling it into partial submission. The thing thrashed, spitting black saliva that sizzled on the dusty ground. Tyrion looked on, grim and pale, while Daenerys stood with her lips parted, letting the gruesome sight speak for itself. This is only one, Jon said, raising his voice for all to hear. There are thousands more, an endless horde. They don't tire, they don't feel pain, and they obey the White Walkers who command them. If we don't unite, if we don't set aside our petty wars, this is our future. Nani? Cersei stared, her regal mask cracking enough to reveal genuine horror. Jaime swallowed hard, unable to tear his eyes from the white snapping jaws. Even the mountain seemed uncertain, helmeted head tilted. Qyburn stepped forward as if to touch it, but the white hissed and lunged, nearly catching his arm. He retreated swiftly, eyes alight with the glee of a scientist witnessing a marvel. Finally, Cersei found her voice. Gods, You expect me to believe this horde is marching south? She cut a sharp glance at Daenerys. And you, with your dragons, can do nothing to stop it. Daenerys lifted her chin. We haven't enough men or dragons to face them alone. Even if we combine forces with the north, and every other kingdom, it's uncertain we can hold them back. We need you and every Lannister soldier willing to defend this realm. A charged silence followed. The White continued to thrash. Jon gave a signal, and Tormund and Davos wrestled the abomination back into its crate, slamming the lid. Chains clanked as they locked it in. Slowly the gathered parties exhaled. Cersei narrowed her eyes at Jon, at Daenerys, at the dragons overhead, as if weighing the immeasurable cost of war. She glanced sidelong at Jaime, who seemed almost pleading in his gaze. Then she shifted back to Tyrion. Something flickered in her expression, loathing, resentment, but also fear. How do we know this isn't a trick? She demanded. You could have conjured some foul necromancy to fool me. Jon stepped forward. I fought them, lost friends to them. Do you think I want this to be true? We gained nothing by hauling this monster across the sea. We're offering proof because we need your help, or we all perish. Cersei's eyes glittered with malice and uncertainty. Then Jaime spoke, voice low. I saw its eyes, Cersei. That thing isn't alive, and if there are more, no castle walls can stop them. We've seen them climb the wall. We've heard the tales. It's madness. She hesitated, the moment stretching like a taut wire. Jon realized they stood at a precipice. If Cersei refused, all might be lost. The tension hung so thick that even the dragons, perched on the crumbling dome of the old dragon pit, seemed to wait. The next heartbeat could decide the fate of millions. At last, Cersei exhaled. Fine, she said, voice clipped. I'll accept this threat is real, on one condition. When the time comes to fight these monsters, you will not turn on me. If we put aside our war, I expect the same courtesy in return. And after the threat is dealt with, we shall see who truly deserves to rule. Daenerys inclined her head. You have my word. The realm's survival is greater than any throne. Nathshirs. Jon nodded in agreement. We have no interest in attacking you. Not while the dead approach. This war matters most. He cast a glance at Daenerys, who returned his nod. Tyrion let out a soft breath, relief creasing his features. Still, Cersei's eyes lingered on Jon. You speak of no interest in attacking me, yet your queen demands fealty from all the 7 kingdoms. Do you stand by her in that demand, king in the north? Jon ground his teeth, recalling the vow his northern lords had made for independence. But he also recalled the conversation with Daenerys, the mutual understanding they needed each other. I stand by what is necessary to defeat the undead, he said carefully. There will be time to discuss crowns and titles when we've survived the winter. That answer seemed to mollify Cersei, though it was clear she harbored a snake's nest of suspicions. So be it. She turned on her heel, summoning her guards with a sharp gesture. We shall prepare. When the dead come, we'll stand together to meet them. I suggest you keep that thing, she gestured dismissively at the crate, away from my city. With that, she swept from the dragon pit, Qyburn scurrying after her, the mountain trailing like a silent specter. Jaime paused just long enough to share a look of silent understanding with Brienne of Tarth, who had arrived with Sansa's blessing, though she had stood apart during the demonstration. Then he too followed his queen. The Lannister guards filed out, leaving the hush of the ruins. As soon as they were out of earshot, Tyrion let out a long exhalation. I can't believe it worked. Cersei's not usually one to yield anything. Well. Daenerys wore a pensive expression. She hasn't yielded, not truly. But if she's agreed not to hinder us, that's something. At least we can rally the armies without fear of being attacked from behind. Jon nodded, though a tightness in his chest remained. He had not missed the flicker in Cersei's eyes, a cunning that suggested she might say anything to ensure her own survival. But for now, they had a tenuous accord. Perhaps it was the best they could hope for. We should see to our next step. We need to gather our forces in the north. Let every able-bodied man, woman, and child prepare. All. Daenerys glanced at Drogon, who spread his wings in a restless display. We'll fly for Winterfell soon then. I'll bring what I can, unsullied Dothraki, my dragons. We'll hold the line. With luck, we can form a barrier before the dead reach the heart of the realm. They dispersed from the dragon pit, returning to the harbor where their ships waited. The White's crate, still sealed and rattling, was placed under guard, though a few of Daenerys' advisors suggested destroying it now that they had shown it to Cersei. Jon insisted they keep it a while longer. Perhaps others needed convincing. The horror was too valuable a demonstration of their plight. None were eager to handle it again, but they saw the logic in his words. Shadowfire, for its part, glided overhead like a silent omen. Jon could sense the dragon's agitation amidst the bustle and tension of King's Landing. Several times, he touched its mind, quietly urging calm. The last thing any of them needed was a dragon lighting the city ablaze in a moment of panic. Fortunately, no such calamity occurred. By nightfall, their fleet departed the Blackwater, heading north again. Jon stood on the deck, staring back at the city's receding lights, an uneasy swirl of triumph and foreboding twisting in his gut. That sense of unease worsened as they made their way up the eastern coast. Though the seas remained eerily calm, the night skies seemed darker, the stars duller. Sometimes Jon dreamed he heard the distant howls of whites across the waves, even though such a thing was impossible. Ghost paced the deck, similarly restless. Daenerys visited his ship once, riding Drogon in a magnificent display of power, to discuss final arrangements for the northern campaign. She spoke of forging alliances with the Vale, with the Riverlands, of sending emissaries to those uncertain houses in the Crownlands. Jon listened, but his mind kept drifting to the image of the Night King, tall and cold, raising an army from every battlefield they left behind. Their time was short. Soon enough, they reached White Harbor. There, they divided their forces, with a portion traveling by land toward Winterfell, and another continuing by sea to Eastwatch, where they could reinforce the wall's eastern flank. News reached them that the free folk near Hardhome had seen ominous shapes moving under the auroras, throngs of the dead perhaps. Each raven arriving from the far north carried worse tidings. The night fires were burning in the haunted forest, signals that the free folk used for warnings. Daenerys and Jon, after much deliberation, decided to lead the main host to Winterfell first. From there, they could coordinate with Sansa and the Northern Lords, then dispatch forces to reinforce the wall if there was still time. 4 dragons soared overhead, Drogon, Rhaegal, Viserion, and the black-scaled Shadowfire, causing as much alarm as excitement among the Northmen. Many had never laid eyes on a dragon and muttered that the Targaryen queen brought only destruction. Others whispered that Jon Snow, the White Wolf, commanded beasts of legend because he had the blood of the dragon. Rumors abounded. On the day they arrived at Winterfell, snow drifted in thick swirls around the ancient walls. Sansa came out to greet them, wrapped in a heavy fur cloak, her hair catching the flakes in strands of copper. Her expression was a mixture of wariness and relief. Behind her stood Arya, her gray eyes sharp as knives, and Bran seated in his wheeled chair, expression distant and knowing. The Northern Lords gathered, wearing uncertain scowls at the presence of Daenerys' armies. Yet when the Queen touched down upon Drogon in the courtyard, her banners rippling in the icy wind, they at least mustered a respectful silence. Jon dismounted from a horse, turning to Sansa. "I've brought our allies," he said simply. "The war we feared is nearly here." Sansa studied Daenerys, her poise and regal bearing, the rose of unsullied fanning out behind her. She inclined her head slightly. "We'll offer them what hospitality we can, but Winterfell is already pressed for supplies. I hope you brought wagons of grain as well as swords." "No, not in isolation." Daenerys dismounted from Drogon, the snow swirling around her. "We've brought what we could, Lady Sansa, but we'll need to ration carefully. My men aren't used to these cold conditions." Her gaze flicked around the courtyard, taking in the Stark banners, the looming towers. She offered a gentle smile, though it did not quite reach her eyes. "I thank you for accepting us into your home." Sansa exchanged a glance with Arya, who regarded the newcomers with a fierce, evaluating gaze. Then Sansa nodded. "We welcome any who will help us fight the dead." Her tone softened. "Thank you for coming. Truly, the storms grow worse every day, and ravens speak of nightmares beyond the wall." Jon approached Bran, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's good to see you, little brother." Bran's strange, far-off stare flickered. "Is the dragon truly yours?" he asked, voice calm, as though addressing a trivial matter. Jon hesitated, following Bran's gaze to Shadowfire, which hovered above the ramparts, wings beating the snowy air. "We're connected," Jon said softly. "I can warg into it, or something close to it." Bran nodded, almost to himself. "Interesting. The threads of destiny converge here. The long night comes again." Jon knelt by Bran's side, brow furrowing. "Have you seen something? Do your visions tell you anything about how this ends?" Bran's expression revealed little emotion, but there was a faint note of sorrow in his voice. "I have seen storms of ice and wings of shadow over the battlefield. I have seen the Night King on the fields near Winterfell, darkness spreading like a plague. But the future is always in motion. Choices remain. Now." Jon swallowed, rising to his feet. The cold wind bit at his cheeks, but a deeper chill sank into his bones, the chill of dread. Bran's glimpses of the future were often cryptic but rarely wrong. "Then we make our choices," Jon said quietly, "and we fight." Over the following days, Winterfell became a hive of preparation. Armies converged from the Neck, from White Harbor, from the Barrowlands, from the Knights of the Vale led by Lord Royce, all heeding the call to stand against the dead. The yard was crowded with tents, the halls bursting with men and women of all classes. Sansa took charge of provisioning, working day and night to dole out rations. Arya quietly organized her own band of skilled fighters, men and women adept at infiltration and sabotage, prepared for anything. Daenerys conferred with Grey Worm and Jorah Mormont, who had recently arrived from Bear Island, plotting battle lines and possible strategies against an enemy that did not follow conventional tactics. Conventional tactics. Jon, in his role as king in the north, or at least as its foremost war leader, wore himself thin meeting with lords, hearing concerns, and consulting with Daenerys. Whenever he could snatch a moment alone, he visited Shadowfire, which perched on the outskirts of the Winterfell grounds, far enough not to trample the huts. The Black Dragon spent much time hunting in the air, though fewer animals roamed in the deepening winter. Jon feared the beast might starve, or worse, grow irritable enough to start devouring the horses or soldiers. But for now, it seemed content to bide its time, occasionally letting Jon ride it in short flights over the snow-laden fields. The northern folk gawked, half in terror, half in awe. It was during one such flight that Jon witnessed something that would change everything. He and Shadowfire were high above the Wolf's Wood, scanning the whitened canopy for signs of game, when Jon's eyes were drawn to the northern horizon. At first it was merely a gray smudge against the clouds. But as he guided the dragon closer, shifting his perspective to the beast's keen vision, he realized it was far more than a smudge. It was a rolling storm front, a wall of swirling ice and snow that blotted out the land behind it. And beyond that wall, faintly, he glimpsed dark shapes shifting in unison, a countless mass of whites trudging south. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. The dead were on the march, possibly mere days away from reaching Winterfell's outermost territories. He urged Shadowfire to descend, returning to Winterfell at breakneck speed. Once on the ground, he leapt off, stumbling as his legs adjusted from flight. Ghost bounded up to him, but Jon was already shouting for Tormund, Davos, and the others. By nightfall, a war council had convened in the Great Hall. "They're close," Jon said, voice taut. "A day's ride north, 2 at most. An army, too large to estimate." An uneasy murmur spread among the lords. Lyanna Mormont, young and fierce, stood on a bench to be heard. "We stand at Winterfell, the seat of House Stark. We'll hold as long as we can." Daenerys nodded, her face set in grim determination. "My dragons will be in the skies. We'll coordinate strikes. The Unsullied and Dothraki will form a line before the walls, supported by archers on the ramparts. The northern armies can protect the flanks. If we can funnel the dead into a choke point, we may stand a chance." Tormund spat. "They'll climb over each other like ants. The White Walkers will hang back, sending wave after wave. Unless we take the fight to them, they'll overwhelm us eventually. We need a way to kill the White Walkers themselves." Arya spoke up from the shadows. "Valyrian steel, dragonglass. We have some. Not enough for every soldier, but we can distribute what we have strategically." Davos rubbed his beard. "The main problem is the Night King. He commands them all. If we kill him, maybe they fall. But how do we get close to him?" Jon exchanged a look with Daenerys. "In open battle, he'll likely remain behind his lines, We have to draw him out somehow. He turned to Bran, who had been listening silently. Any chance you can lure him, or see where he might appear? Bran's eyes flickered. He will come for me. I am the three-eyed raven. He knows I contain the memory of the living. He will want that snuffed out. A hush fell. Jon's stomach clenched. We can't risk you. If he kills you. Bran's voice was soft but certain. I must play my part. We could use me as bait. Lure the Night King into the open. Then, the dragons, someone with dragon glass can strike him. It's the only way. Daenerys set her jaw, a muscle flexing in her neck. That's a dangerous gamble. Arya stepped forward. I'll go with Bran. I can fight to protect him. Jon shook his head. No, you're needed on the battlefield. Bran, this is too risky, but if we have no alternative, we'll plan accordingly. He looked around the table. We have one night to prepare. They'll be here soon. Summon everyone. Every man, woman, child who can hold a weapon. This is it. The gathering dispersed in controlled chaos. Orders were shouted. Men scrambled to reinforce the gates, the walls. Daenerys flew off with Drogon to scout the approaching horde. Rhaegal and Viserion followed. Shadowfire soared alongside them, responding to Jon's mental nudge. The dusk sky blazed with the silhouettes of dragons. The storms thickened, swirling with an icy malice that seemed almost alive. Snow fell in heavy sheets, cloaking the world in a bitter darkness that swallowed hope. Through the night, the armies readied themselves, arranging torches and trenches, piling dragonglass-tipped spears, distributing the precious few Valyrian blades. Jon paced the battlements, exhaustion gnawing at him but finding no room in the maelstrom of tension. Ghost prowled beside him, white fur dusted with snow. He caught glimpses of Daenerys overseeing the Unsullied in the courtyard. Sansa worked tirelessly to shepherd the last of the small folk into shelter behind the fortress walls. Arya and Brienne drilled a group of defenders in the yard, their breath steaming in the frigid air. Samwell Tarly, newly returned from Old Town, organized the sick and the wounded in the crypts. The entire castle thrummed with the knowledge that dawn might bring utter devastation. But the dawn never truly came. The morning was a dim gray twilight under a steel sky. A horn blast shattered the hush, echoing across the snowbound fields. Jon raced to the ramparts, heart pounding. There, in the distance, he saw it, a seething mass of bodies, an uncountable tide of the dead, stretching across the plain. The wind carried their keening moans. As the watchers on the walls stared, more horns sounded, signaling the approach of White Walkers behind the thralls. The temperature seemed to plummet further. Ice formed on the rampart stones, making them slick. They're here, Tormund growled beside Jon, hefting his axe. Let them come. We'll show them the living don't die so easily. Daenerys landed Drogon atop the walls, the dragon bristling with anticipation. Rhaegal and Viserion circled overhead, letting out shrill cries. Shadowfire soared to the north side of the castle, the black dragon's roar slicing through the wind. Jon felt its mind pressing against his, a mixture of hunger and fury. He steadied himself, focusing on calm, on the need to coordinate their attack. Below, a thunderous chorus rose as the dead surged forward. The first wave slammed against the prepared trenches, where dragonglass-tipped palisades impaled dozens. Archers loosed arrows by the score, each arrowhead dipped in dragonglass. Some undead collapsed, limbs severed or heads destroyed. But there were always more. A writhing mass pressed on, ignoring their fallen, crawling over the bodies to fill the trenches with the weight of their numbers. Fire! Daenerys shouted. She spurred Drogon to unleash a torrent of flame that rolled across the battlefield, incinerating hundreds of whites. The blaze lit the swirling snow in a hellish orange glow, steam billowing as undead flesh charred. Rhaegal and Viserion joined in, strafing the horde with bursts of dragonfire. Screeches filled the air. For a moment it seemed the onslaught slowed. Yet the dead did not halt. Animated corpses flailed through the flames, some crumbling to ash, others pressing on with limbs alight. Their unnatural resilience chilled the defenders' hearts. Then the White Walkers came into view, tall, gaunt figures with armor of ice, eyes glowing blue. They raised their spears. An unholy wind gusted, and the flames guttered, dimming in spots. Bran sat in the Godswood, Near the heart tree, eyes rolled back as he warged into ravens. Arya and a small group of elite fighters circled him, weapons at the ready. They guarded the bait, hoping to draw the Night King. Jon, posted on the wall, peered across the battlefield, searching for any sign of the dreaded figure. The swirling snow made visibility poor, but something moved in the distance, something on the back of a terrible mount that screeched. An icy shriek echoed over the plains. Jon's heart clenched. The Night King rode an undead dragon of his own. Viserion had once fallen beyond the wall, resurrected by his dread power. Now it soared in the storm, frigid blue flames crackling from its maw. A wave of raw fear slammed through the defenders. The undead dragon swooped lower, unleashing a blast of icy dragon fire that froze lines of men instantly. Shards of ice sprayed in lethal shrapnel. Screams rose. Jon grabbed a horn to his lips. "Daenerys, the Night King is here." He pointed. Daenerys, astride Drogon, saw the undead Viserion circling. With a furious command, she urged Drogon upward to meet it in aerial battle. Rhaegal followed, bellowing a challenge. Shadowfire soared from the north side, beating its dark wings. Jon closed his eyes briefly, forging that mental link. He felt the black dragon's rage, the desire to tear into this undead abomination. With a single leap, Shadowfire launched into the sky, pursuing the Night King's mount. Jon felt the lurch of flight in his gut, even though his feet were on the wall. The symbiosis was partial, a melding of senses that threatened to overwhelm him. Yet he clung to it, guiding Shadowfire's path. Below, chaos reigned. The whites hit the walls, clawing at the battlements. The defenders fought hand to hand, steel flashing as they hacked at rotting limbs. The White Walkers advanced methodically, killing with ease anyone not armed with dragonglass or Valyrian steel. Tormund led the Free Folk in a furious countercharge, while Brienne and the Knights of the Vale worked to hold the gates. Sansa coordinated archers from atop the inner ramparts, her face ashen but determined. Arya vanished into the gloom, presumably guarding Bran with her lethal skill. Jon tried to focus, but he felt pulled in two directions, the surging need to fight on the wall and the call of Shadowfire overhead. He pressed his fists against the icy stone. "Davos, Tormund has the gate. I'm going for Bran," he shouted over the din. Davos nodded, slashing at a white that lunged. Jon turned, sprinting across the ramparts, cutting down an undead figure that rose from a fallen soldier. Blood and ice coated the walkway. Every breath burned with cold. He made it to the courtyard where the swirl of battle was thickest. Bodies lay everywhere, living and dead entangled. The stench of rot and burned flesh choked the air. Overhead, dragons roared, locked in a deadly struggle. Jon caught glimpses of Drogon snapping at the undead Viserion, of Rhaegal slashing with his claws, but the storm's fury made it near impossible to see clearly. Shadowfire swooped in, unleashing a jet of blackish flame that clashed with Viserion's pale blue fire. Thunder seemed to shake the heavens. The monstrous silhouettes twisted together, locked in mortal combat. A scream drew Jon's attention. He turned to see a White Walker stepping into the courtyard, spear of ice in hand. A half-dozen northern soldiers lay dead at its feet, their weapons shattered. The Walker's icy gaze fell on Jon. Cold pulsed from it like a living aura. Jon hefted Longclaw, the Valyrian steel sword that had served him so well. He met the Walker's charge, steel ringing against ice. Sparks flew. Each blow reverberated through his arms, sending jabs of pain to his shoulders. The Walker was unnaturally strong, every strike forcing Jon back a step. He grit his teeth, refusing to yield, and on the next parry, he twisted his wrist, angling the blade beneath the Walker's guard. With a savage thrust, he drove Longclaw into the creature's torso. A sound like cracking ice echoed. The Walker shattered, fragments collapsing into a swirl of snow. Jon staggered, breath ragged. No time to rest. He forced his legs forward, heading for the Godswood. The path was a snarl of fighting. Unsullied men formed disciplined ranks, but the whites kept coming, crawling over the bodies of their own to close the gap. A second line of living warriors, made up of northern peasant levies, fought desperately with dragonglass-tipped pikes. The courtyard and halls were an inferno of madness, pockets of flame from the dragons mixing with waves of cold so intense the ground cracked. Gritting his teeth, Jon pushed on. He nearly collided with Jorah Mormont, who was badly wounded, leaning on his sword. Blood slicked the snow around him. He looked up at Jon Dan. "Go!" Jorah managed, eyes fierce despite his injuries. "Protect Bran." Jon clasped the knight's shoulder, then continued on, ghosting past fallen men and severed limbs, the metallic tang of blood saturating the air. Somewhere behind him, a colossal crash shook the castle, perhaps a dragon landing, or part of a wall giving way. It was impossible to tell. He found the path to the Godswood strewn with the remains of wights, hacked apart. The heart tree's stark white trunk glowed in the gloom. Bran sat beneath it, eyes rolled back as if in a trance. Arya was there, spinning gracefully through the fray, her Valyrian steel dagger slicing wights into pieces. A handful of free folk, including the giant one's cousin, if Jon wasn't mistaken, battled near the edges. But the assault here was intensifying. More wights poured in, likely drawn by the presence of Bran. The men roared defiance, but fatigue was wearing them down. "Arya!" Jon shouted, rushing to her side to help carve through a knot of shrieking corpses. She flicked him a quick glance, her expression set in deadly concentration. A wight lunged from behind, and Jon whirled, cleaving it in two with long claw. Icy fluid spattered the ground. More advanced. Jon recognized with a sick jolt the face of a man he had once trained at the wall, now pallid and dead-eyed. He sliced the abomination down, heart twisting. The living had no choice but to kill these husks. Bran suddenly gasped, blinking rapidly, returning to himself. "The Night King," he whispered, voice trembling in the hush of the swirling snow. "He's coming." A shape emerged from the shadows of the trees, tall, gaunt, wearing armor that glinted like cracked ice. His eyes glowed with malevolent blue light. The Night King carried a wicked blade of frozen crystal. Around him the air crackled, freezing the ground with each step. Arya spun to confront him, but the Night King merely lifted his hand. An invisible force flung her back into a tangle of roots, her body hitting the ground with a bone-jarring thud. She groaned, dazed. Jon gripped Longclaw, breath ragged. This was it, the moment he dreaded. The Night King's gaze pinned him, a silent challenge. Behind the pale monarch, more wights staggered forward, but the Night King waved them off with an imperious gesture, as if wanting to face Jon alone. A swirl of snow parted around them, the heart tree's red leaves rustling in an eerie hush.